It's probably Jalen Hurts' development. Not to say that I'm shocked by it, but that Vikings game really stands out to me. There have been games where he hasn't had to be Superman, and you're not saying, wow, he's really taken a huge step. But that game specifically to me, I thought he reached a level which we hadn't seen.
Sheil, good to see you. Number one, thanks for jumping on the show. The Ringer can read Sheil there. Listen to him everywhere. How many podcasts you got over there? The Philly Special, everything.
We've got the Ringers Philly special where we talk Eagles, Philly, Sixers, and whatever else is going on. And then on the Ringer NFL feed, I've got 2 shows a week. So if you want just NFL coverage, you can check that out on Monday and Thursday. There you go. I got the plugs out of the way.
All right, we got the plugs out of the way. We can talk about the Eagles bye week. Jody, you're still muted. Hopefully we can figure out why Jody is muted, but we will continue on with Sheil Kapadia. It's bye week here in Philadelphia. Obviously, you've been doing some Phillies work, so it's in a lot of ways, I think it's perfect for the Eagles because they're 6-0. We generally have this, the Eagles are everything in this town, as you know, and they kind of get to fly under the radar. You think that's a good thing for the Eagles as they go through this self-scout and try to keep this up as being, if not the best team in football, certainly amongst the best 2 or 3?
Yeah, I think when the schedule first comes out, you always look at the bye week. All right, is this at a good time or a bad time? And this one, when it first came out, you're thinking, all right, it's a little bit early. You're a third of the way really into the season. But with the injuries and some of the stuff they've had going on up front, I think it comes at a great time. They're 6-0. They're feeling good. They can do the self-scouting. They can look at what's working, what's not working, really look ahead and try to predict because really a lot of stuff has been working pretty well. They're the only undefeated team in the NFL, but you want to get ahead of it. So, yeah, I think it comes at a good time for them. It comes at a good time for me. I mean, these baseball games every night and then watching the film of the Eagles on Tuesday and then keeping up with the NFL. I mean, I don't want to burn out by Thanksgiving. So I'm happy to just be able to watch the Phillies here this weekend. We can chill with the Eagles and then get ready for their final 11 games.
Hopefully you guys got me. Can you hear me now?
We got you.
Yeah.
Good. Some technical issues. Thanks for hanging with me, guys. And yes, when I asked Sheil to come on the show, I had to butter him up by saying, love the pictures of you and your daughter at the Phillies game. Did the same thing with my daughter for the series against Atlanta, which is very cool when you get to hang out with your daughter at playoff baseball games. But back to football. 6 games in, like you said, a little under 1/3 of the season. What has surprised you most about the Philadelphia Eagles? We all had our preseason expectations, predictions, and the like. They are 6-0. They've got a question or two attached to them, but how do you complain with 6-0? What has been the most surprisingly good thing about the Philadelphia Eagles through 6 games for Sheil Kapadia?
It's probably Jalen Hurts' development. Not to say that I'm shocked by it, but that Vikings game really stands out to me. There have been games where he hasn't had to be Superman, and you're not saying, wow, he's really taken a huge step. But that game specifically to me, I thought he reached a level which we hadn't seen all of last year, and just the way he was operating from the pocket, the way the passing game was clicking. And so, I think that was the question going into the season. What was his development going to be like with the new supporting cast with A.J. Brown? And you look at it, they've had a top 5 offense in terms of efficiency through the first 6 games of the season. And so that, not the biggest surprise in the world, I guess. You could kind of see it with the pieces around him, but still there was uncertainty around what version of Jalen Hurts you would get, and I think he's played well.
To continue with that theme, Sheil, one of the things I'm impressed with the Eagles is the coaching staff, Nick Sirianni, Shane Steichen, Kevin Patullo, Brian Johnson, the way they've developed Jalen Hurts. You've been around this team for a long time. We all know what Jeffrey Lurie wants in the offseason. I think Nick Sirianni paid lip service to that in the offseason. And then when the games start, he does what he says he does. He's going to do anything to win a particular football game. If that's running Jalen Hurts 15 times, he'll run him 15 times. If that's, shoving it down Jacksonville's throat in bad weather, he'll do that. You mentioned the Minnesota game. It was just take advantage of that soft zone, throw the football. He morphs week in and week out. you have a beat on this league from your time at the Athletic, from a national perspective, now with the Ringer. That's rare. That, there's not every coach that is that malleable. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, they don't overthink it. Like you said, they're looking at, I mean, it's really the core of coaching. Look at the personnel you have, the talent you have at your disposal, and then come up with ways to maximize, make the sum, greater than the individual parts. And that's really what they've done. I mean, take that game last week, for example. They ran the same run pass option, the same RPO 3 times. They get it on a 4th and 3. They did it on A.J. Brown's first touchdown, and then they did it on Devontae Smith's touchdown in the second half. There are coaches who they get into these games and, like Sean Payton had this monstrous playbook, and Sean Payton's fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but not every coach is Sean Payton. You get into trouble when you think you're Sean Payton and you're not him, or you think you're Bill Belichick and you're not him. And so I think what the Eagles have done is they've just said, listen, we're probably going to have an edge with our offensive line most weeks, if not every week. We're probably going to have an edge one-on-one with 3 guys, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert in most matchups, unless you're facing, a top 3 or 4 defense in the NFL. Let's not overcomplicate this. Let's get to the plays Jalen Hurts is comfortable with. Let's get the ball in our playmakers' hands. Let's let our offensive line impose its will. I mean, these last 2 fourth-quarter drives, that's rare. They're just in a big spot. That's a high-level spot, and you're coming out and you're running the ball 10 out of 13 plays and going down the field like they did. And in the previous week, 17 plays, 70 yards. And so they're just leaning into their strengths and not overthinking it. And if something's working, go back to it, go back to it, go back to it. Once they show they can stop it, all right, come up with a plan B, come up with a wrinkle. But until they do that, you don't have to overthink it and say, well, we practiced this play on Thursday and we really liked it when we were watching film and it was so cool when this other team used it. Hey, let's make sure we get to it. No, you don't need to do that. You need to go with what works, like you said, and what wins the game.
All right, Sheil, I'm in my car 2 days ago. And I got my guys from WIP on, Marks and Reese, and they put their poll question out. I thought it was pretty interesting. It was an A or B question. The actual best answer is C, a combination of the two, but that wasn't an option, and I'm not going to give you that option either. The Eagles are 6-0. They've got a lead now in the NFL and the NFC. The standings say what they say. Are the Eagles where they're at 6-0 and leading everybody at this point because they're just that good, or more so because the rest of the NFL is that mediocre or average and the Eagles are above average, and that allowed them to open up a little distance between themselves and everybody else? Understood. The answer is B, C. It's both to a percentage, but if you only have choice A or choice B, which one is it more?
Yeah, I would say it's because they're a really good team. I mean, like you said, we know it's a combination of the two, but I mean, that win against the Vikings, you blow the Vikings out, and the Vikings have lost 1 game this season, right? They're 1 or 2 games this season. That Jaguars game, I know the weather had an effect, but they've won some games this season. The Cowboys with Cooper Rush, we look at, it was Cooper Rush. That's fine. They beat the Bengals. They beat the Rams. I mean, they held the Bucks to 19 points in week 1. That's a good defense. And so I'm with you. It would kind of be fun. I was thinking if in the second half of the season, we got to see them play the Bills or the Chiefs or, the Bucs, some of these teams, whatever teams you think are really good, the Ravens, get tested a little bit more. They have an easy schedule. You don't need to apologize for an easy schedule. The breaks are what the breaks are. You beat the teams. We've seen Eagles teams in the past have an easy schedule or be 7-point favorites, and you have the letdown game, and they haven't had the letdown game. They're winning these games pretty comfortably, even if they're having little lulls here and there. I mean, last week, it felt like a nail biter. They won the game by 9 points. I mean, most games are not decided by 9 points in the NFL. Most of them are under 7, under 6, around 3 points. So I'll give them credit. I don't think it's fluky what they've done so far. The schedule has played a role in it, but at the same time, we can believe our eyes, and they're dominating some of these teams.
Yeah, I'm with you, Sheil. I go back to the Super Bowl season, and I thought, I think it was the Carolina game where I first said, this is a really good team. This is a really good team. And I started to get that feeling. This year it was even earlier. I was like, wow, this this team's good. This team's really, really good. And I don't think that's changing, but we do, Philadelphia better than most. And, people nitpick, and that's what we do. A lot of times we do it here on this show. I look at the 6-0 start and I say, all right, how can you sustain it? I hear other people, and I get it from the Eagles' perspective. I mean, they want to get better. They want to play up to the standard, the nebulous standard of perfection, which doesn't exist. You mentioned the lulls. Everybody's concerned about the lulls. I think it's human nature. One thing I look at and say, how is this sustainable? And that's the plus 12. Plus 12 in turnovers. The number 2 team in this league is plus 4, Sheil. They're plus 12. They've turned it over 2 times. Is that sustainable? There's some randomness to that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's randomness to it. It's not sustainable throughout the course of a season. I haven't looked up the numbers, but if you take that plus 12 and then multiply it by, keep this rate the rest of the season, it would be an NFL record. I mean, no one has ever done that. So to me, it's interesting to look at if you split up offense and defense. Offense, I sort of feel like I want to give Jalen Hurts credit for that. I mean, he has scrambled 76 times since the start of last season and has not fumbled the ball once on any of those scrambles. I mean, you watch teams around the league, the way quarterbacks are running when they take off their feel, and that's rare. And so I do think he deserves credit for being really good at that, taking care of the football, and the ball's in his hands like every play. I mean, he's handing off sometimes. A lot of those are option plays. And so he's still, that ball handling is really impressive, and we probably don't give him the credit that he deserves there. Defensively, I'm with you. I think if we see some issues for this team the next 11 games and they're not getting those turnovers that they're getting now, it's more, hey, just got to kind of drive in and drive out and stop the opponent. That will be interesting to see once they face some good offenses. But it goes back to the point we just made. Not a lot of great offenses on this schedule, the rest of the way. The Packers are struggling. It's still Aaron Rodgers. The Cowboys, you'll have Dak Prescott. The Giants have certainly improved, but I don't, if you look at the talent there, they're doing more with less. That's a good coaching job. It's not like they're loaded, and just the next month of the season you really face some cupcake offenses again. So I think you're right. I think that randomness, there's stuff with, hey, a pass gets deflected, did you have a guy there to make the interception? Did he drop the interception? A fumble, well, who recovered it? Sometimes that's random, but it's an oddly shaped football. Which way does it bounce and who jumps on it? Those types of things, sometimes they go in your favor, sometimes they don't go in your favor. And so I think that's something that'll probably even itself out a little bit the rest of the way.
Speaking of giving coaches credit, I did earlier in the week, John did as well. When am I going to be able to get my Stoutland University t-shirt? I'm still bummed out that I haven't seen it anywhere. That was great with my Lotta the other day during the introductions. Stoutland University. He's the best offensive line coach. That's a no argument position to take. Jeff Stoutland, best offensive line coach in Philadelphia. Have we gotten to the point where we just almost take him for granted? That's one of the reasons why I love what my Lotta did. Because again, pointing to the fact that you guys are so lucky to have the best offensive line coach in football. How good is Stoutland?
Yeah, I did a big story on him 2 or 3 years ago, after they won the Super Bowl. And it was just, one of the most important members of the organization. And it's baffling that some of these teams don't view the offensive line coach the priority that the Eagles have. And remember, he was brought in under Chip Kelly, and then he stays under Doug Peterson, and then he stays under Nick Sirianni. And I'm sure he's had opportunities to leave. This guy coached with Nick Saban at Alabama. There are a lot of options he would have. And so it's rare for a guy to stick around through 3 coaching tenures. One coach, I think, high up in the organization, he's very valued, and for good reason, because last year, I mean, we don't even remember this from last year. They didn't have their 2 starting guards the entire season. I mean, both guys, Sayamalu and Brandon Brooks, those were supposed to be their starting guards. Both guys got injured, and they had a top 5 offensive line. I mean, look around the NFL. You lose 2 starters on the offensive line. A lot of times that torpedoes your entire season. You look at some of these games, Jordan Mailata goes down. Lane Johnson goes down. Landon Dickerson leaves for a couple possessions. We have some plays here and there where we go, okay, Driscoll got beat here. Suo Opeta, not great there. but they're not wrecking their game plans. They're not losing the games for them. It's really hard to do. I mean, again, you just look at some of these teams around the NFL that have had injuries up front, and it kind of ruins their entire week. It ruins their entire season. It ruins these stretches. Their offenses can't function. And that doesn't happen with the Eagles because, like you mentioned, the offensive line coach has these guys, Jeff Stoutland has them prepared week in and week out. I mean, Jordan Mailata, as much as we talk about it, we probably still don't give that enough credit. I mean, it's just incredibly
it's
rare.
Unbelievable. Every once in a while, I think about it, Sheil. Once in a while.
Never played football, and now is a top 10 left tackle. Not a guard, a left tackle, the premium position on the offensive line. The guys that get paid $23 million a year, and that, I would say 2/3 of the league are saying, man, I wish we had an upgrade at this spot. We don't have one of those 10 guys that's really that good. And, Mailata certainly deserves credit. He was putting in the work. But, as he mentioned, Jeff Stoutland University, he knows that if he's in a different spot, maybe his career doesn't go the way it's gone.
Yeah. Hidden MVP of the Eagles, maybe Allison Stoutland, who is the wife of Jeff Stoutland. I think a lot of people forget Bruce Feldman, who might be the best college football reporter in the country, reported Jeff Stoutland was going back to Alabama when Doug Peterson got fired. And Allison Stoutland said, I'm not going. She likes the area. So the Eagles were able to talk Jeff Stoutland back. So, he's done a phenomenal job. Interesting thing about Jeff, Sheil, why does nobody hire his assistants around the NFL? There are so many bad offensive lines in the NFL. I'm surprised Roy Isban now, Eugene Chung before. Why do people not hire Jeff Stoutland's assistants and at least try to replicate what the Eagles have been able to do on the offensive line?
Yeah, it's so tough with coaches. You don't know. I would always make the joke, don't hire someone just because they once drove Sean McVay to the airport or, had brunch with him.
They get interviews.
It doesn't always rub off in that way where we've seen it with Bill Belichick's assistant. So it's a fair question. I don't know. I don't know well enough what those guys have done, how much of what Stoutland does kind of rubs off on them and that they would be able to take to a new place. But, certainly would probably be worth a look if you're looking for an offensive line coach.
All right. We've thrown this out a couple times this week, Sheil, because it's the bye week and we're looking for things to talk about. Howie Roseman, contract extensions. He's been very good at identifying guys, getting extensions done. Part of the foundation. This is not a foundational player, but it should be a player that they should be considering having on the team in 2022. And that's Brandon Graham. A lot of conversation this offseason. Brandon's last year. Would he actually go sign with someone else if he wants to continue to play? Are the Eagles ready to move on from Brandon Graham? Well, he's come back and he's making plays and he's contributing pretty big. We know what he means to the locker room, but I'm talking about on-field production. He's been getting the job done. How tricky a negotiation is that for Howie Roseman and Brandon Graham? And it could be starting like today, this afternoon, not just wait till the season ends and let the whole year play out. Is there a conversation to be had about an extension with Brandon Graham for the Birds?
Well, I'll tell you what, he saved a touchdown last week watching the film this week. That pressure he had. I mean, James Bradbury falls down on a double move. The Eagles have a middle of the field safety. I mean, that's a 60-yard touchdown to CeeDee Lamb most of the time if he doesn't get there in time with that pressure. So, I mean, it kind of depends what Graham wants to do. Now, Roseman's MO with some of these players who, I don't know if legend is the right word, but guys who have been around, meant a lot to the organization, meant a lot to the culture. We saw with Fletcher Cox this last offseason. He signs him to a 1-year, $14 million deal. I think that was more than any other defensive tackle got last offseason. And, whether he was worth that or not, you know what I mean? They'll I think, take care of those guys. I think that, previous regime and the Brian Dawkins thing always kind of stuck in Howie Roseman's head when he was thinking about some of these core players. And so if Graham wants to, whether it's a 1-year deal, whether it's what Graham wants to do, what the team wants to do, but, they've got Josh Sweat and they've got Hassan Reddick, but beyond that, they're not exactly loaded. Who knows what's going to happen with Derek Barnett next offseason coming off the injury, and he's just not as good of a player as Brandon Graham is. And so you have Patrick Johnson. And so it depends, that's certainly an area where you could see them address in the draft, free agency, trade, whatever. But at the same time, if he's in that rotation as kind of a third edge player who can also be a starter if somebody goes down, I would say we'll see how the rest of the year plays out. But as of right now, he's playing like a guy who certainly has that value.
Yeah, and BG says he wants to get to 15, and he wants to get to 15 in Philadelphia. So we'll see how that shakes out. But you mentioned the word trade. November 1st is almost here, Sheil Kapadia. We know Howie Roseman's history at the trade deadline. A lot of people bring up Jay Ajayi in the Super Bowl season. Not as many bring up Golden Tate, which didn't work out as well. I don't want to mess with this team, Sheil. At least the core of this team. I don't see a lot of needs. Nick Sirianni talks about connection and chemistry, probably a little bit too much, but I do think it's real. If it's a depth piece, add to special teams, maybe get a returner. No problem with that. I don't want to mess with the core of this team. Am I being too cautious?
I think it depends on the guy, and it depends on the coaching staff. Like you mentioned, Ajayi, that Super Bowl season was viewed as kind of a malcontent in Miami.
Yeah.
If you remember it, and then he comes in, and the locker room seemed to love Jay Ajayi. He was a great fit. He was a great player. It was a trade that worked out. He really kind of helped them with that running back by committee. And so if it's somebody like that who you're confident with, maybe it's somebody who in the building already knows and kind of the makeup of the player, their work ethic, how they are in the locker room. I have no issue with making a move. Listen, you have a chance to win a Super Bowl this year. There's no mincing words. You're 6-0. You're the favorites in the NFC. You've got a deep and talented roster. So far, the health, the injury stuff has worked in your favor. So I'm with you. I don't know, what a huge splash would be, what a high risk move would be. But if you were to tell me, hey, they add a running back to the mix, or hey, they add a cornerback or a safety for some depth purposes, because that's one thing I look at. If a safety goes down, if a corner goes down, you're kind of in trouble. We saw it briefly last week.
Yeah,
Gardner-Johnson leaves the game, and Kayvon Wallace. You don't want him playing every week if you lose one of those safeties. If Bradbury or Slay goes down, you're in a bit of a pickle there, depending on what you think about a guy like Zach McPherson. So those guys don't, grow on trees, starting caliber cornerbacks. But if there's somebody who you kind of like and feel like, hey, let's get ourselves another option. So cornerback, safety, running back, those are areas I think you can at least look at. And then defensive line is just an area they kind of always look at. And that's one that you kind of look ahead to 2023. Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave are both free agents after the season. So if there's a player you like who you feel like, hey, he can help us now, and he's under contract beyond 2022, then I think you can at least explore that option.
All right, Sheil, last one for me. I'm going to ask you to do a little role playing for me. I just saw this tweet. Great statistical information. The 2021 NFL coaching hires. Urban Meyer done at 2-11. David Culley got his one shot 4-13. Dan Campbell biting those kneecaps 4-17-1. My guy Robert Saleh, who's improved, but he's still 8-15 over a year and change. Arthur Smith. The Falcons are another team that's better than I thought they were going to be at the beginning of the year. They're 10-13. Brandon Staley is 13-10. And then there's Nick Sirianni, who's 15-8. Not even close. He has far and away the best record of anybody who was hired for the first time as an NFL head coach last year. You play Howie Roseman. I'm the agent for Nick Sirianni. And tomorrow I put a call into you, Howie, and say, the coach just loves it there in Philadelphia. You guys have such a great working relationship. Any chance you want to tack on a couple of years? He wants to make the commitment to be a Philadelphia Eagle, maybe for life. How would you like to talk about a contract extension for Nick Sirianni with 2+ years to go on his deal because he signed a 4-year deal? If you're Howie Roseman, what are you saying?
Probably saying let's wait till the end of the season. Let's let him coach here. I mean, 4 years is not, he's not on a 1-year deal. Settle down over there. But certainly, I think if the season goes the way, it certainly could go for them, and that's obviously something you could talk about at the end of the year. But he's done a good job. There's no doubt about it. Just kind of the adjustments on offense, the relationships he has with the players, the culture seems strong. He's not like a drill sergeant type. At the same time, he's not a pushover. I think they play discipline. I mean, you watch them play every week. They play a disciplined brand of football. They execute well in high leverage spots. So I think there's a lot to like about him. And it seems like he's got that Doug Peterson trait of just somebody who's likable around the building. And I think that's really important to ownership. That's important to Howie Roseman. I don't think Sirianni's going to go in there and say, get me player X, Y, and Z. I want to start making draft picks. So that's the kind of balance you need in a role in the Eagles organization. So I think he fits all those things.
TheRinger.com, Sheil Kapadia, read them there. Billy Special. Last one for me, since we're talking contract extensions, I agree with you. This defense, Sheil, though, Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, Brandon Graham, we already talked about, Kaiser White, James Bradbury, Marcus Epps, TJ Edwards. Everybody's on a 1-year deal, basically. Howie's known for getting extensions done early, but he's also known for leverage. And 6-0 isn't the best leverage for a GM to get a team-friendly deal. If he gets somebody done early, I gave you all the names. Who would you pick?
Going through them in my head. Epps, Edwards, Bradbury, Hargrave, Cox. Am I missing anybody there?
Kaiser White, Brandon Graham, we mentioned. A lot of guys.
You know what? That last one, Kaiser White, you mentioned, that might be one. I mean, that's a position where they haven't had a lot of luck, as we know, at linebacker. I think he's played really well. And he's the guy who he just got to test the market. And he came back with, what was it, a 1-year, $5 million deal. I mean, he was just a free agent. So he might be thinking, all right, I already know, it's not like some guys, if you never get to free agency, you want to get to free agency. You want to see what the market's going to be like. He just got there. And so that's one that could make sense. I don't know what the number would be off the top of my head. You certainly would give him a little bit of a raise, but I don't think you're doing anything crazy where he's getting like, Fred Warner, Shaquille Leonard type money, anything like that. So there might be a middle ground there where he says, I'm young. I like it here. I play well in the scheme. I had my opportunity to test the market last offseason. Let's go ahead and kind of make a deal there. The other guy I thought about was Epps. I think Epps is somebody who he didn't have a great game last week, but I think overall he's giving you solid starting caliber safety play. It's another position where you sort of had some trouble filling that spot really since, you had Brian Dawkins, then you had Malcolm Jenkins and the Rodney McLeod who were a good set. But right now there's some uncertainty at that spot. And again, he's not somebody who I think you're paying at the top of the market, kind of a homegrown guy. So I think those are the two that kind of stand out just from the names you gave me.
Sheil, are you going again this weekend? Just going to be watching it with your daughter when the
I think I'll be at home having it on the TV here, unless I luck into some last minute tickets. But I'm looking forward to it. It was a blast last week. Let's see if they can bounce back from a game 2 again and kind of give us a surprise World Series run. So I'm excited to watch starting tomorrow.
Enjoy, Dad. We enjoyed having you here with us today. Thanks much, bud.